Good morning. Hi, Gloria. And while people are coming in, maybe Jim or attendee Simmons, if I'm pronouncing your first name correctly. If you want to introduce yourselves and just kind of what you do maybe with community outreach or fire adapted communities. Jim, are you there?
It appears that all attendees can unmute themselves for this portion.
Okay, so I'll ask to unmute. How about now?
Simmons should be our, Eric Simmons, our technical support guy. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, Gloria. Hi.
Okay.
And I just, Jim just unmuted. So Jim, just you want to introduce yourself and just maybe what you do in community outreach or interest in it?
Yeah, this is Jim Webster with Wildfire Partners in Boulder County. So we do outreach. We've got over 2,000 participants. So we're getting homeowners to sign up to do mitigation.
Fantastic. I'll just call on some. So basically, I think we have 45 minutes here, and I have some slides and videos to show, but I can also give you I'll be giving you a QR code to the slideshows or the videos that you can play afterward as well. But I wanted to start with just kind of a general conversation of how of who's in the room and kind of what your interests are. I'm gonna also have Mike Macy, who's in here now. He can introduce himself and maybe even turn on your camera, Mike. You'll be a co-presenter with me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good morning. Mike Macy. I'm with SimTable. I'm a division director there. My background is 35 years in the fire service in Southern California. Still pretty active with the National Fire Academy and their EF4 program. Spent some time, quite a bit of my time in fire prevention. So that's kind of where I come from. And we had pretty good WUI area in the district that I worked. So I have some experience in that, but happy to be here and be happy to answer any questions or help in any way that I can. Thank you, Steve.
Steve, just a real quick note. My name is Gloria Edwards, and I'm the director of the Southern Rockies Fire Science Network. I've always been fascinated with what SimTable and Stephen is producing. Very interesting stuff in demonstrations. It appears that I'm your host for this session, and it appears that by activating the Zoom session, it kicked me out of the events on air portal. So I'll be monitoring chat. I'll try.
I think it's in the back. It might be in the background screen. I'm seeing it as two screens, maybe.
No, I'm not seeing it anywhere.
So,
so if you have questions, I'll be monitoring the chat. And we can work that way. And it appears that we have Wendy Fisher and Eric Simmons as technical support. So I'll just be watching, helping with Q&A within chat. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, with the chat there, if interrupt at any time or put the questions in there, or if you want to introduce yourself at this point too, Danielle or Tyler or Steve. Hi, welcome, Steve. But I'll go ahead and just give some basic introduction. First of all, I'm sure many of you maybe have seen SimTable in the past. In fact, in the chat, let's just do a test here. Just write yes or no if you've seen the SimTable live before. How about that? Let's just try that. Anyone. So yeah, find the chat and there you go. Fantastic.
That's 1, 2,
Gloria.
3.
Hi, Steve. In Lakewood. Tyler Gilbert, no.
Oh, Tyler, where do you see this? Tyler is in logistics with the Forest Stewards Guild.
Okay. And how about you, Danielle?
It looks like we have a total of 3 right now. If you're looking for how to do chat, take your mouse over the bottom of the screen and the lower toolbar will show up and the chat will come in.
Okay, and welcome Steve there, just came in. All right, so I'll go ahead and just give some background on the SimTable. I guess we have 45 minutes, and again, we'll monitor, and Gloria will help me monitor the chat. And if you have questions, I'll take them in real time, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. And hopefully that's coming through okay. Gloria, can you see it? Okay.
It's coming through on my end.
Okay, great. So we've been, we're researchers out of Santa Fe, really interested in how systems become collectively intelligent, right? And the fire world is one of those particular places where it's a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of distributed information. And we find the SimTable is one of the places where we can collect that information and allow people to train together. Initially, we developed it because we saw firefighters using SimTables for training. As we've released it, we're finding almost a 10-to-1 use is in community outreach. The training has been okay, but not to the degree that we see agencies and fire adapted community or Firewise going out into communities and engaging with the community. Because at the end of the day, the fire is, and I'm preaching to the choir, a community problem. It's not an agency problem. I mean, the agency is a part of it, but at the end of the day, there's these opportunities when we engage with a community to just give them a basic understanding with a table of what their local terrain is. Many folks know what their roads are and the ins and outs of their community, but do they really know the drainages? So we sculpt the sand and let them put water on there to see kind of how the water flows. And a watershed, in many ways, a fire shed is kind of the opposite of a watershed, where if water is running downhill and where water comes from. Fire shed is where fire comes from, which is basically you look downhill and the fire is running uphill toward you. So it's all the places that you're at risk where fire is downhill from you potentially and upwind, right? If you looking at predominant wind. So what is a community's fire shed? And basically what are, as they hear stuff on the news, what does spotting mean? What does containment mean? What is a fuel break? They hear all this stuff on the news, and it's an opportunity to kind of introduce these terms, and especially getting into things like fuels mitigation and prescribed burns, fuels thinning, evacuation routes, why we might want to do something with our roads, why we might not, look at our one-way in and outs in a neighborhood as we simulate evacuations. And I think there's a really big icebreaker when you can sculpt the sand with a community instead of just giving them PowerPoints, right? And allowing them to come together. I will say, during COVID, we've, when we do a lot of this, being able to run this on the web is also possible. The same thing as being projected on a SimTable runs on the web, and you can remotely tie people together via the web, where they're putting in some action and it shows up on everyone else's simulation too. So we can maybe show that at the end if we have time. And even changing the paradigm, what is fire? Many people think of it as a monster, right? And it's coming into the forest. But if you can, there's an opportunity for kind of some science education of where, talking about a tree, just in a simplified way, is just sugar. When sugar and oxygen come together, and then let's just think of the tree as basically just a carbohydrate, right? And if that's a C6H12O6 and oxygen coming together to make carbon dioxide and water. And letting people think, that smoke they see, the white smoke, is really just water, right? And it's that tree converting to carbon dioxide and water. And if it goes the other way with light, carbon dioxide and water, well, that's photosynthesis making the trees. So letting them see this kind of bidirectionality and kind of thinking a fire a little bit differently, and ultimately preaching to the choir here, we need more fire. We can't just be suppressing all the time. And ultimately what we'll show also too is getting the community to put in cameras and use, or as a community, install community cameras like the Alert Wildfire Network in the West, or Colorado has them as well, but having those for real-time views of the fire sheds, because right now we're blind on fire. So I'll go through a little bit of this. It's kind of the basically the content here. So I'm going to play a couple of videos that we're pleased when we see our customers making videos about the SimTable. So we actually discover these online, so it's nice for them to kind of present their own words. I'm going to show two examples from Australia where they're using the SimTable for community outreach. And for some reason, maybe when we launched in Australia, we were perceived much more on the community outreach. In the US, we're perceived much more on fire training, crew training. And frankly, it's not as useful for that. So for some reason, Australia is embracing it for the community outreach much more. So let me go ahead and play this.
The last bushfire season was unprecedented. 33 people lost their lives, over 3,000 homes were destroyed, and more than 12 million hectares were burnt. I'm so pleased that local government New South Wales, with funding from the New South Wales government, is able to assist councils to help their communities prepare for future fire seasons and build resilience to climate change.
So we've had this SimTable a little over 6 months. It came about from a grant that we applied for with local government New South Wales. SimTable is based on something called ambient computing. We can put in all our data and then we can simulate over that floods or fires.
The SimTable is an incredibly simple and user-friendly and intuitive piece of equipment to use. So what you have in front of you is a tray filled up with a crushed walnut shell. Above it is a short throw projector connected to a computer. And what that does is that it projects these images onto the crushed walnut shell. The key part to how it works is actually this infrared camera. That camera watches the table, and that allows us to manipulate and control the menu of the SimTable. For example, with a laser pointer, we can change the wind speed and direction, and we can control the speed of the simulation. The quality of the education and engagement which we are able to achieve with the SimTables is quite remarkable.
We split our workshops into either looking at people who are vulnerable to bushfire because of where they live or because of a sector that they're part of. We run through a simulation from North America. It's called the Campfire, and it is the most expensive and destructive fire to date. Then we set Ku-ring-gai up. We sculpt the landscape to be Ku-ring-gai. We then bring down the satellite image of Ku-ring-gai, so you get that 3D image. We ask people to put a flag where their house might be. And then we simulate a fire. We talk about the weather conditions leading up to the day. 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, we want you to think where you would be, what you would be doing. And the day is going to proceed. It's a catastrophic fire day. You had the warnings. We change the wind direction so that the fire behaviour changes accordingly.
Big fires under big winds, they can spot, tens of kilometres ahead of the fire front.
And in catastrophic conditions like this, no house is safe. Generally, the first impression they have is one of shock and fear. And then as we walk them through the Climate-Wise Communities website, which twins with the SimTable, then they see, oh, I can do something about this.
We certainly have seen the benefit for us in Ku-ring-gai and for the Ku-ring-gai Council. We've also actually shown it to a lot of our colleagues in other brigades, and they've seen, a significant benefit of having that simulation capability. The most important part was it also gave us an opportunity to engage with the residents.
Oh, it's a fascinating way to display the way fires move and make you think about the sorts of situations that you could be put in.
Well, I think the SimTable is terrific. I thought that I was prepared for bushfires. I've lived through them in this environment. But then I went to the modelling and I really learned a lot about the way fire travels, how it can travel, how it can change so quickly. And I guess it also reinforced the idea that actually you're on your own.
So something like the SimTable, allowing people to get their heads around what climate change actually means on the ground and the nature of these events and how it will affect these events, is a really important tool for councils to have. The ability of the SimTable to attract people to the workshop has been a beautiful outcome of this whole process.
We know climate change is causing an increase in the frequency and intensity of fire weather. Councils have such an important role to play in preparing their communities for bushfires. I encourage you to learn more about these tools and how your council might use them to save lives and protect homes.
It's really a no-brainer in the obligation that councils have to work with their citizens to allow them to become more resilient.
Come back to so that's the use in Ku-ring-gai, which is New South Wales. If I think, you know, climate change they mentioned in there, but I think also the focus on fuels and understanding, you know, if you do there's ability to put in fuels mitigation in here, and ultimately from a forest resiliency, kind of having that discussion of what is it going to take over 30 years to get our forest back to a resilient point where the fuels are very in a mosaic or fractal pattern. You know, so in much the same way that Mexico's fuels are much more mosaic because they don't have as much suppression. So how might we as a community get to that point, right? Which is it's a big paradigm shift of how to get there. So far, are there any questions? Again, we're tracking the chat, and thanks for the bit there, Steve. But I'll pause now. One more time, Gloria.
Am I echoing? I am.
The last bushfires.
Let me also mention here, this URL here, or a QR code if you want this presentation, and I'll go ahead and put this in the chat here, which is just bit.ly real-time earth wildfire, right? So everything that's on here, you guys can look at later. And this is also an opportunity now to talk about real-time earth. And when we do community outreach, SimTable is a physical table that people get around. Real-time earth is a complementary thing that we're developing over the last 6 years of how do we take all the imagery on an incident and stitch it together so we're not blind on during an emergency. Right now, if you look at California, most people don't know where the fire is. By the time we get maps, it's 8 hours, 12 hours old, right? It's improving with like alert wildfire cameras. And so what we're doing is stitching all that together and geo-rectifying those cameras so that every pixel is arrayed into space so that you can actually render the fire. So I just wanted to go through a little bit of that here too, and relating, this is with this last bit here where I mention real-time collective intelligence. And you know, being in Santa Fe, we're very interested in how things like how ants find food or how birds flock in a decentralized bottom-up way. And it's not about collecting intelligence, which is our current paradigm, where everything goes up to some central place, and then you try to get that out to the PIO and disseminate that to, say, public safety, which then emergency management and reverse 911. That just doesn't work. You know, we need to make much more collectively intelligent and having that bi-directional interaction with the citizens, because most of the time they're going to have the first camera footage of the fire, and they're the ones that need the intel more than even the crews, right? So, at least for that first couple hours. Once you get into extended attack and IA gets there for initial attack, yeah, the crews need it. But in that first couple hours, that data needs to come from the citizens and back to the citizens. So how do we train them to be almost like an intelligence section in an incident management team, which is also new to incident management teams. We have SIT unit, but what's going to be the next generation of imagery intel? So that's what I want to kind of talk about now, and how to get citizens trained. So by the way, here's one for Victoria in Melbourne. You can see that. And just a really quick example here of sculpting the sand. I'll just show this real quick. So we're coming through here, and just to show you how it works, it scans the table and recovers the height, right? Or you can, here we are in Santa Fe, and we can light take a lighter and simulate near St. John's College as it moves up towards our ski basin, right? So that's how we make the table interactive. But let me kind of go into now the collective intelligence bit.
Hey, Stephen, can you hear me okay? Stephen,
Yeah,
this is Gloria. I have a real quick question. I see how you have an infrared camera and you sculpt the walnut shells, the sand, and add in variables of weather, topography, temperature, all of that. But how do you project the fuel load?
So the fuel, currently we take just land fire, so Anderson 13 or Scott-Bergen 40 as a layer. And then we also have fuel density that we can manipulate, which is an important thing as you're doing thinning or a treatment, or if you had maybe a prior burn and some grow back, you might want to manipulate the density. So that's just another layer too. So that's a good question. So basically you have slope. So basically we have rate of spread based on slope, fuel type, temperature, RH, and fuel type. And currently usually we're locked down at 90 degrees and 10% RH.
Okay, but you rely on the data from land fire.
Yeah, and to be clear, we do not use this as a fire behavior analyst tool. All models are wrong, some are useful, and models are written for certain purposes. Our purposes are really just to do basic training with fire crews, and really it's all about the comms and where you're setting up. If you've ever been to those classes, it's rarely about the actual fire behavior, in the weeds. It's much more about getting your comms and your situation set up. And then for communities, it's now what we can do also though is play back real fires, and then we can tune the rate of spreads from observed fires, which I'll show you here in a second. But then the idea would be also to bring in any other kind of fire model, whether it's Janice Cohen's stuff up in NCAR, or Joaquin Ramirez's Technosilva is really good as well. Okay. There'll be a video if you want to play this offline later on your own, kind of how it all works. You can kind of see the deployments we have. Those are the two tables down in Australia and Spain. I'll also just show you here in the US, you can see, and you saw Greater Eagle Fire Protection District. You saw this kind of, I previously had a news article of their use. And by the way, here's like the grizzly fire. When we come in and run it on the table, we can kind of interpolate the perimeters and kind of look how that was moving. So that's where we're more interested in capturing the actual fire behaviors instead of just modeling and predicting. We're much more about where is the fire and how did it actually behave, and then informing the models based on that, right? So this is the Grizzly Creek. And so let me now kind of give you the big picture here of where we're moving with real-time Earth. So like I said, we've learned, being in this great community over 10 years, I mean, we really are passionate about this space. And I'm just like many of you, it's a great community to be in, right? It certainly isn't a lucrative one. But, people are here for I think the passion of it, right? But what we've discovered is we are blind during emergencies. We have no idea where the fire is collectively, right? So in the last 5 years, we've been working on ways of taking citizenry imagery. So for instance, here's the Hayden Pass fire. Right now we're around Colorado Springs looking south, and this is Howard over here. And here's a citizen tweeting out on a flight. And can we use that as real-time intel, right? So I'll just present that as examples. The Hayden Pass was like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So this is when we started kind of thinking about the problem. And also after Granite Mountain in Yarnell, we had imagery, but we didn't know where they were. So that's like, that's a lesson learned. We need to improve that. So here's like taking a tweet, and we're able to calibrate a camera and figure out its lens properties so everything lines up. Or here's a citizen tweeting near a bridge on the river near Howard, and they have a view of the fire, right? So can we stitch all of this stuff together in real time and draw on the pictures so that we would actually know where the fire is at that moment, and ultimately render it into a 3D scene, right? So just like in, you'll see here in the campfire, there's 20,000 phones with cameras. We already have the information, we're just not coordinating it, right? We don't need new drones and, I mean, it's good to get the National Guard and the persistent vision, but in those first couple hours, we already have the information on our phones. We just need to collectively stitch it together. So here's testimony I gave to the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the summer. And it kind of tells the story here, right? So it's only 2 minutes, so I'll go ahead and play this. And you'll see my son over in the corner here. He was helping me. I'll play that here.
Stephen Guerin from SimTable is up next and last, I think.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. From Santa Fe with Senator Heinrich's territory. You can play with a sand table here later. We've been using that for 10 years for community outreach and firefighter training. Over the last 5 years, post-Yarnell, we started to look at the other kind of problem of how do you take all of the cameras and videos on an incident and stitch them together, especially the citizen data in the first 3 hours. Bringing all the GIS together and sharing it. How can we become collectively intelligent on a scene without giving up privacy? This is possible to do with phones in our pocket, without having servers, and having your data shared the information, but not your data, your microphone or your cameras. Here you see Yarnell. We're taking the imagery from Yarnell, Granite Mountain's last shot, and as well as air operations. You see air attack coming around here and painting basically the perimeter at that point in time. So we can calibrate every image from a drone or from a phone using just browsers and being able to deploy in real time. CAL FIRE is using this on the campfire. Starts at 6:30, it's at Paradise at 8 a.m. And people are calling in with no intel. They have no maps. This is beyond wildfire. It's a whole community problem. How do we have real-time intel out now and get maps to people and get the imagery from the people to save wildfire fighters? This is not just single agencies. This is a whole community. Yeah. They have imagery. There's 20,000 cameras feeding live. Can we use them all? Here's what air hell attack is seeing. That needs to be real-time intel. You can stop that frame from someplace else and say, this is the most important place to drop water. We need to stitch this stuff together. Thank you.
So how are you stitching it? So what are you saying?
So with machine vision now, you can find where you are. If you can solve for where a camera is, every pixel is a ray.
If you want to have a complete picture, particularly for those people in some command center that here's the vehicle on the ground, or the neighbor who has data, or someone who's just, looking over a ridge, how do you get all that data into one place?
So on a peer-to-peer network, different people can have relevant operating pictures. So going back to the incident command center or to SIT unit section, they can get their bit. Everyone has a relevant operating picture. There is no place that needs to be a central place. Nobody needs everything.
But you want to share that with all?
Yeah, definitely sharing.
Okay, got it.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we have to go vote, but I am going to come down there and look at.
Thank you.
One additional one now. This is some recent work that Kaz did, one of our researchers, and this was on the LNU lightning complex, which one of the big fires in California, upper in Napa. And this is where in Colorado, you guys have your own camera networks, so it doesn't have to be alert wildfire. But the importance, and we can help. We have this real-time.earth software that can calibrate the cameras, and what that means is the position XYZ orientation of the pan tilt, and the focal length of the zoom. And if you can solve for that, you can use imagery as intelligence, right? So let me show this example here. And again, use the chat if you have any questions along the way.
In this video, we present our preliminary analysis of lightning strikes and fire ignitions on the LNU Lightning Complex Fire using our platform, Real-Time Earth. For this analysis, we used 4 cameras from the alertwildfire.org camera network, including Lake Berryessa, Lake Berryessa East, Atlas Peak West, and Sonoma Mountain. The lightning storm primarily responsible for these ignitions came out of the south. With this grid view of the cameras, we can watch as the lightning storm rolls through the area. This set of cameras captured over 40 lightning strikes associated with this storm. Viewing the storm from Sonoma Mountain, lightning strikes associated with fire ignitions are shown. Using the calibrated alert wildfire cameras in Real-Time Earth, we can determine the heading of the lightning strikes identified. Going back to the grid view, we can see that a fire ignition has been identified in the Atlas Peak West camera. Visualizing this fire ignition on the landscape, we recognize correspondence with a lightning strike captured in the Sonoma Mountain camera. With this information, we can estimate the start location of the fire. As the storm moves through the area, we identify additional lightning strikes associated with fire ignitions. This lightning strike captured on Berryessa East can have its location more definitively determined, given the fact that we can see where the lightning strike hit the ground. Back in the grid view, we can monitor the progression of the lightning storm as it moves through the area. We note fire activity increasing at the ignition point identified in Atlas Peak West. Another fire ignition is spotted beyond a ridge in the Berryessa East camera. With this camera being calibrated, we can estimate the location of this ignition. Back in the grid view, we see increased activity in the Berryessa camera. 4 ignitions are identified, 3 of which are associated with lightning strikes seen in other cameras. Here we visualize the fire ignitions with respect to the lightning storm progression. We continue to monitor the activity of the 4 ignitions in the Berryessa camera. Going back to Atlas Peak West, we mark up the fire perimeter to estimate its size. The calibrated camera allows us to generate GIS and estimate the size of the fire to be roughly 3 acres. In total, we identified 6 fire ignitions associated with the lightning storm in the 4 alert wildfire cameras that we focused on. Here we display our estimated ignition locations with respect to some of the original fire perimeters published by NIFC. We note 5 of the 6 ignitions identified lie within these perimeters. The 4 fires associated with these ignitions, including the Gamble, Spanish, Green, and Hennessy fires, all went on to become part of the LNU Complex Fire.
Okay, So Steve asked, is that automated? So there's, right now, this is offline that Kaz had to put this together. But the project we're working on right now with Alert Wildfire is for their 600 cameras. For every camera, we're making it so that every pixel has a lat long and depth to it, so that when you draw on it, it goes on and makes a GIS layer. So, and if any people are interested in beta testing that, send us an email, just Stephen at SimTable. And let me show you one last one that so that's showing you kind of why we need to get the infrastructure of these cameras together. And imagine with community outreach, donating or asking citizens, maybe you get a grant and give 100 or 200 hour security cameras and paint them red, and they're part of the community. And the citizens don't, if they're up on the ridge tops, donate their power and Wi-Fi at their homes to be basically like a citizen-based alert wildfire. These cameras are $3,500 cameras, and it's like $70,000 to get up on the towers to install them, and then trying to get internet to them is quite expensive, but worthwhile. But we can also do this with citizen home cameras, right? And I just want to show you now, when think about your PIOs, and when a fire starts. Now we're going to show you now taking social media. So for right now, think of us as audible resources like imagery, intel on an incident, maybe under sit unit, right? So imagine crawling social media and calibrating those cameras like we showed with the airplane. But now the PIO should be putting out a live map of what's going on. And from the browser, people can open up their camera. And if they give permission for location and orientation, we can use that information. Right. So let me show an example here on the Maria, and this will be the last thing I show. I think I have it here. Yeah. But again, you can watch all of these on your own later. And I'll go ahead and present this, and I'll speak over this one here. So basically, this was on Halloween night, and we didn't get a map to the public, or Ventura didn't, until November 2nd, because on November 1st, there was drones in the area and they didn't get an infrared flight. But we should be able to be doing this in the first 3 minutes of the fire. So here's Alert Wildfire. After the 911 call comes in, here's a camera about 20 miles away. And this is all running in the browser, by the way. This is our real-time Earth. And so now we see the start of this fire. And our pixels are really big because we're far away, but at least we kind of know where it is. And so now when we see this coming from Twitter with no telemetry, we can estimate where this photo was looking. If we can find 8 points of correspondence, we can actually estimate the lens properties and the location of that camera, right? So now we're going to interpolate what this fire is doing and then forecasting where it's going. So below the fire, we're overlaying with GIS models, and that could be Janice Cohen's, that could be Joaquin's, that's ours. But the important thing here now is the PIO text out a map, and when this citizen gets it on the north side of the fire, they can open up their browser and turn on their camera. And if we have their lat long and orientation, now your F-band come in here and draw where they currently think the perimeter is, which will be a correction to the models. So we're observing the actual fire behavior, and you can see where that correction is, that we need to speed up here and slow it down over here. Right? And now there's going to be another camera over here from Alert Wildfire that's looking east, and it's looking at this drainage here. And this is, security cameras going to the infrared at night, right? So we have frame by frame time of arrival and residence time of the fire, right? So here you're going to see some 20-minute contours, but we have it every frame, right? And so from that, we're capturing the actual fire behavior, because we can look up for every pixel what the fuel type is, what the density is, if you've already captured that in the past, and the slope and aspect, right? So now we have rate of spread for every pixel. From the time of arrivals, we derive rate of spread and direction, and then we match that up against the fuel types. So there you go. We have 6 fuel types in this view, and we know how that fire behaved, but also overlaying our resources and labeling them. But also imagine drawing, I need a prescribed line or proposed dozer line up this ridge. So imagery becomes your intel. Maps are in the background, right? So you can maybe ask questions here. I guess we're right at 11:40. Are we done at 11:40, Gloria?
We are done at 11:44, 11:45, and it's going to automatically cut us off.
Okay, so
I have 11:38.
Ask questions or?
Well, could you, I'm interested in clarifying some of the other questions popping up where Steve Orr was asking operator input and stuff. So the stitching together, the combination and stitching together of all this information at once you're proposing is used through your current realtime.earth stuff on your website, but it's proprietary, but it's free to be used during any fire.
That's right.
Talk about that a little bit.
So you can open up your camera from a browser, right? So I think, so we want to get with the PIOs. I think the trick there is, well, first with community outreach, make sure people know about it and train them how to use it. So with school kids, we're training them to shoot clouds above their school, especially as they're remote. At the same time every day, go out and take pictures and face your school, which is a nice little geo challenge, like facing Mecca, and shoot a time lapse of 10 minutes, right? So that's getting the community to learn how to collectively observe, right? And then during an incident, we want PIO tools. When you text out your messages, your maps, don't just put text of what's happening, put out a live map and that map is where people can open the camera. Now, and I don't want to oversell kind of how far along we are on this. I mean, we're not deployed. We're close to deployed. And of course, we'd like funding. We've been doing this for 8 years with no funding, but we're ready to release. But it would be nice to get some DOI and U.S. Forest Service funding to do this a little bit quicker. But we're coming on and we're releasing. You'll see on Alert Wildfire there'll be people that can annotate Alert Wildfire Network, which is 600 cameras out west, right? And so that's actually being deployed right now.
Okay, we're at 11:40. We still have a few more minutes. I'm not seeing any new questions, but I bet there's some in there. So this is really bypassing all of the mapping programs and resources and how the system is currently working.
Can you repeat the last bit, Gloria?
It just seems to be like it would be revolutionary to be bypassing. I mean, the maps are still needed, but you're bypassing this to inform models in response.
Yeah, and think if people can see the fire, it's no longer a monster and it's no longer everywhere, right? Especially when we want them to change their relationship to fire, right? If I can, I use the analogy of an active shooter. If you know where the shooter is, they're not scary. If you don't know where they are, they're a terrorist, right? Same thing with fire. If people can see it, they don't need even models. If they can see how it's been moving, we've been looking at fire for 50,000 years. People can make a decision if they can see it. And then when you look into prescribed burn, show them the fire behavior, show them removing the understory live. Otherwise, they're going to bitch about the smoke, right? And they don't, and then the rumors of like you're burning down the forest. No, I mean, people can see that cathartic removal of understory. They can feel a sigh of relief when they see the actual fire. If you give them charts and maps and models, they don't believe you, and they shouldn't. That's not enough. People, they don't know how to validate it. But if you show them it, you can change the paradigm. And by the way, here's if you guys want to, all those videos are here, and you can QR this. There's more there that you can kind of go through. And again, if you want to reach out to Mike and myself, so Mike at simtable.com or Stephen PH at simtable.com. And I did mention, I see Doug came on here, Chief Cup, and they've been using it out there in Greater Eagle, and I really like that community outreach potential, right? So they can probably express some of the stuff that they've been using it, and I think in a very very exciting way.
Chief Cup, we have one more minute. Can you say in a few words how you've used this in your community? You're unmuted. We should be able to hear you. Oh, well.
Okay.
Maybe he doesn't know he's here.
Again, if people have questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll put my phone number on the chat here. You're probably gonna get locked out here pretty quick, but you can get me here too. And oh, we lost everyone?
Nope.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you, Gloria, and Wendy, if you're still here, and Mike.
Yeah, thank you for being part of the Colorado Wildland Fire Conference. This is greatly valuable, and maybe we can do an additional webinar through the Southern Rockies Fire Science Network.
Yeah, and if you can see a way, Gloria, that we can kind of partner to get this rolled out, right? I mean, I think this is, at the end of the day, we're researchers. We're kind of forced into a vendor hat just to fund ourselves. But if we can be more true researchers, we can make all these tools completely free, right?
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for joining, everybody. I'm going to stay until this cuts us off.
All right, bye.
It looks like everybody's, everybody left.
Thank you.